Okay, this is episode 74 of Summoning Insight. I'm the usual host, Thorin, and co-host, usual guy that's on the right-hand side of the boxes, Monte Cristo. As long as nothing vague has happened, I notice like as time goes on, his tweets and his interviews and his comments become more like, I don't know if I'll always be involved with League. I love League of Legends though, definitely love League. Won't be even tomorrow. Like, don't take my seat. Might be back, but I also might not be. So maybe show me more love. Maybe don't, because I might leave, but still do sort of like give me all the props and adulation. And I should definitely still be number one, but maybe I shouldn't know. And if anyone in another game that wanted to love me just as much, but in an equal way and fairly, wanted to love me then they should probably talk to me. But if not, don't worry about it, because I'm still a League of Legends. I don't know what's going on with him, but let me just check. You are still a League of Legends caster, right, Monty?
Yes, it's actually the only game that I'm doing currently. But
well done.
The reality.
That was a good political answer there. Yeah, okay.
The reality is that I'm a freelance caster.
Here we go. Okay.
And I have a contract with this company called OGN, and my contract.
I mean, they're getting smaller though. They're only doing half the games now. So okay, keep going. You gotta get more contracts. Monty.
Weird. Weird. You might think that because they're only doing half the League of Legends, maybe they would be thinking about doing other titles. And as a contracted caster to them, I might be obligated as a result of my contract to maybe do some other stuff.
Okay. See, what you should do...
Overwatch.
Yeah, no, you've got it wrong, Achilios. See, the problem with that is if he goes and casts Overwatch, that's not an esports game yet, plus you have to establish yourself. What he should do is expand from just doing like half of the Korean League, and he should start doing like international League of Legends events, okay? Because the thing is, there's a company called Riot, and if you do their events, they give you like swag, and then sometimes I think they give you like RP to buy the skins yourself, and it's kind of a privilege to even get there, So I think in many ways we should just like put ourselves out there, and if we're lucky enough to get picked in the lottery to do Riot stuff, we should just be thankful for it. That's my take anyway. Just my own 2 cents, which ironically is also the actual pay for those events nowadays. But 2 cents will be worth a lot in the UK soon, Monty. So tied it all together. I even meet me on my own country. Okay, right. Anyway, so our guest this week is Achilios. Now, if you're asking yourself who's Achilios, because you only, like a truly dedicated Korean fan, watch SPO TV because it's the hot new thing that everyone's into, and it's quite frankly, it's just taken over by storm. I can understand why they were crowbarred in front of us. No, so the way Achilios became to be on the show, okay, I think it goes like this, okay. I like to be very in depth when I do this, and pay a lot of tribute and give full credit to people's careers. So he was sort of like a not as famous rapid casting who then somehow got involved with Team Liquid and was having Mexican food with them or something. And then because the talent pool, talent drip in League of Legends is so shallow, he sort of tripped over. And then suddenly he was in LCK. So I think, I didn't miss any important transitions there. That was actually your career path, right?
That's pretty much it to a T.
Okay, so that makes sense. Right, we're on to that one. Okay, and also obviously, unlike everyone else in League of Legends, okay, you're following the transparent path where you join OGN and then you immediately start shilling for other games in an attempt to transition to become the number one caster in another game. Monty's still trying to obfuscate that whole path and draw it out really. I mean, that's his way, that's his nature naturally. Everyone else just joins OGN, immediately starts just whoring out to 2 or 3 games maybe even, and then when they become really big in that are like, I could leave at any time. You could leave at any time. So how are things going at the moment, LCK?
I mean, as far as the casting goes, it's great. Outside of the hour and a half pause that Monty and I experienced the other night, but other than those few discrepancies, everything's fantastic. As far as the league goes, everything's insane. Yeah, I guess is a decent way to put it, because we don't know who's the best team. We don't know who's the worst team outside of CJ. It's just it's all over the place right now, but it's in a really good spot.
So here's the thing, Achilios. A lot of people are thinking right now, okay, this is like one of those old episodes where they would bring on like Froskurin or something, and they would allow those people to speak about other regions that they don't cover, potentially like ruin their whole careers, all that fun stuff, raise the stakes. They're thinking to themselves, like, does this Achilios guy, I mean, you just said he was involved in Team Liquid, does he know about NA? Does he know about EU? Well, joke's on them, because I've now waited 5 minutes into the running time. So everyone who's watching this episode, I've got 2 pieces of information for you. So, bad news. This episode is only about LCK. What? That's false advertising. Good news. 5 minutes means that your view counts as a hit. Doesn't matter if you turn it off right now. In fact, do it. Turn it off if you don't want to. You'll probably actually free up some of the server load, so everyone else will get a better experience. They'll all be guaranteed max quality. So I dare you to turn this episode off right now, not watch it at all. See, I'm even using reverse psychology there, because then some of them are like rebels in the modern generation, and they'll be like, oh, I'm not just going to turn it off because you tell me to, man. I'll watch this show even if I don't care about Korea, and just judge whoever it is based on their opinions on Korea, because as a League of Legends fan, I don't require any facts to make my opinions on the game or people who in fact cast it for a living. There we go. I think I've covered everyone there. I've actually spoken for everyone and said everything that mattered there. But still got a show to do. So despite the fact, Monty, as I've just pointed out, anyone who actually clicked, essentially we've got their view now. So we can end this at any time. We can end this in 5 minutes if we want. No, actually, what I'll do is I've just realised I almost tricked myself there, Monty. If I ended it in 5 minutes, they'd see the video was like 11 minutes long and they'd know something was up. So what I would do is I would use one of the old school like YouTube anti-spoiler techniques, and I would make the video last an hour and a half. So if you see the video as an hour and a half now, obviously we didn't really talk that long. It just ends in 5 minutes, but you won't know that until you click forward through the video. So again, it doesn't matter. I win regardless, but we'll pretend like we're going to do it for an hour and a half. So everyone who sees an hour and a half video now, it didn't really last that long, obviously, right? So let's pretend to fill an hour and a half. So 5 minutes or so. Let's make it quick. No one really cares about LCK. It's like stuff happens, people win games. Oh, someone like won a game off SKT, but why doesn't that matter, Monty? Well, here's why. Patches change, fakers still fake it, and then the season ends and then they win. Oh, and maybe at some point during that like sort of entire season of all like 700 games, there has to be like a period of about 14 and a half games where Monty actually like believes in love again, starts to believe like faith is possible, like you can achieve wonders through the imagination and belief. And if you can take those beautiful, iridescent, transcendental ideas, bring them down into the mundane, profane world and make them into beautiful League of Legends, then KT could win the championship. And in that, I love that week, Monty. That week is one of my favorites. I always enjoy it. I always want to see, how does he come out of it at the end? Does he become more cynical? Does he still keep that little fire burning inside him? I don't know how it's going to be this week. So I'm waiting for that to happen, because it's got to happen eventually. And you know what? No spoilers, guys. This might be the week. This could be the week. It's getting pretty good. On the Monty terror threat level,
KT's number one right now.
We're at a solid amber right now, I reckon. We're heading there. So here's where I want to start, actually. I want to start...
Before we get into the Korea thing, I think you did mention something important that Achilios can speak to, because one of the things you started off by saying with the show is that there is like a dearth of League of Legends talent when it comes to developing casting. And I think that Achilios is the perfect guy to actually speak to that, because basically what happened with Riot, and I know we've discussed this on the show previously, is that what happened with Riot casting was really interesting, because obviously Riot themselves found themselves in a situation where they did not have enough casters to actually expand into best of twos and best of threes in North America and Europe. And there hasn't been an amateur scene that casters have had access to, because previously what Riot did was even the Challenger series was broadcast by, for the most part, LCS casters. And then when we look back at what happened where amateur casters could come from, in the early days of the scene, like obviously I came out of MLG, there were people who came out of IGN and IPL before LCS started. Now, when the circuit became codified and they said the professional teams can only play in the LCS, they had their internal casting team and they again, had the Challenger Series, but that was mostly casted by casters who were also casting LCS. And then what happened after that is that when endemic tournaments started to spin up, like the LPL. So if you remember, people like Froskerin and Pyrotechnics came out of the LPL English cast where they were volunteers because Kelsey Moser and Froskerin were able to basically contact China and negotiate the opportunity to have an English cast. Now, this was not done by Riot. It was done independently, so they had to assemble and organize their own casting team for the LPL. Now, many of these people now are working full-time as casters in League of Legends. But what happened was Riot came in and they said, we're taking the English language rights to the LPL, outsourced it to the Sydney office. But then, as soon as people started saying, okay, well, we'd like to do some English language broadcasts of Brazil and Japan, Riot declared that they own all of the English language broadcasting rights for esports of League of Legends. And even though these leagues, like Brazil and Japan, had people who wanted to do it for free to cast English for these regions, Riot said, no, there still is no English cast for these regions. And basically what that has done is it's made it very difficult to identify new casting talent. And what happens every year is during the off season, whether it was the Alpha Draft Amateur Tournament, Challenger Tournament, or the HTC Tournament, which Achilios did this last year with some of the other amateur casters, there's basically a window of time at the very end of the year where amateur casters have a chance to cast NA Challenger teams in independently sponsored tournaments, if these tournaments even exist. I don't know if one's going to exist this year, but they have for the last couple of years. And that's one of the only times you actually get access to see how to develop amateur casting talent. It's a very small window.
Yeah. I mean, in addition to that, even with just NA Challenger tournaments, you can't even take the teams that are remaining in the Challenger series. It's just the new teams that are up and coming. If they are in any way affiliated with Riot and the Challenger tournament, then they can't play in a random league like the HTC league that we ran. So it's a really interesting system. But I mean, I kind of came in right on the back end of having online tournaments and like weeklies that would run. I mean, granted, they were mostly like silvers to like plat teams that were playing against each other every week, but that's what I basically got started in and developed through, was casting for these leagues that would just offer things like RP prizes that Riot would send to them. They had like a decent relationship, so the teams would maybe get like
that is what
a
you
couple
get paid
thousand.
in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'd get like a couple thousand RP, and then maybe like a skin or something like that, like a specific skin, like the Triumphant Rise skin or something. But
okay,
I'm just saying, like that's how they would offer up. That's what they would offer up to people. But that doesn't really happen anymore. You don't see these weekly tournaments sprouting up, and as you mentioned, these tournaments for Challenger just kind of happen at the end of the year in the off season, and then we see a little bit of the talent. There's like a month-long window, and then it's like, well, back to your day jobs, everybody. You can't cast anymore.
See, the thing is, when you say that, like, obviously, if someone's just, like, doing their first tournament, maybe they could just get paid in RP, But I would obviously say to the person organising that tournament, like, your company does make billions of dollars in that. Like, people sort of need money to do things that are sort of like occupations. And then, obviously, some incredibly out-of-touch Riot community manager will just go, let them have Rise skins. Let them have Rise skins. Triumphant Rise. Why can't they all just have Triumphant Rise skins? Like, yes, sir, if you say so. But one condition, my young friend, only if Rise is not in the meta. We're not made of money. Like, some crazy shit. No, the other problem they've had in the scene, of course, guys, if we're being real here, is that a lot of the people who are naturally talented casters and have built up their careers actually held secret aspirations outside of casting, so it was hard to keep them in casting, and so they had to be lured back. So I mean, an obvious example is Jat famously was choosing between should he be a caster, should he be a level designer. There was that great guy that they had in like season 1 of League of Legends called Daniel Z. Klein, who actually ended up being sort of like a Captain America type figure who's fighting Nazis everywhere, even out of time, Interesting guy. There was obviously there was D-Man, who it turned out, actually, I thought he was like a pro caster. In fact, I would have been quite cynical and thought he just only cared about casting. But actually, above all else, he valued love and the romantic, the Venusian arts, I guess you could say. He valued that above everything and gave it all up for love. And you know what? He should have gone the meatloaf route. He should have said, "I'll do anything for love, but I won't do that. I won't give up casting League of Legends," because that was kind of the bag. Then there was Deficio, who secretly aspired to be a general manager, but not secretly enough. And then there obviously was Crepo, who should never have been the caster in the first place. He is essentially just the world's most overglorified LOL King support build guide creator. But he just wants to do it on live TV and during a match where there are other roles other than support. So anyway, as I've established, there's talent, but it's hard to keep them in the game. See, Monty's maybe hinting at something here. But Achilios is here now. He's proud, and we're going to continue on. He's a real caster.
Yeah. I want to just highlight this because I think there are opportunities. There aren't enough opportunities for amateur casters in the scene, and it really has created a lot of scary issues, I would say, in League of Legends when it comes to developing new talent, just because there hasn't been that same support for the amateur casting scene. And I don't really understand why, especially for analysts, because even in the circumstance that Achilios talks about here, where there were weekly cups, that's great for play-by-play casters like Achilios, but you can't actually show that you have knowledge of the professional game as an analyst under those conditions. It's not really possible because the teams are doing the same kind of advanced lane swaps, which makes it harder to identify color casting talent, and giving away even the Japanese or the Brazilian scene is enough. I mean, those scenes are advanced enough to actually, I think, have quite a bit of value there for identifying upcoming casting talent. So that's been one of the disappointing factors to me about how League of Legends has been operated by Riot, and I think it has actually caused some regression in finding good casting talent. And now that we came to a point halfway through this year where Riot needed more casters because they have simultaneous streams going on in both regions, I think that problem has become even more pronounced.
Do you have anything final to add on that topic, Achilios?
I was just going to say, I mean, I think it's still an ongoing issue that they still need more casters. They're still looking. They just posted on, their website that they're looking for another play-by-play and analyst in Europe, I believe. So they're still having this trouble of being able to find people, and it really was just a situation of shooting yourself in the foot by taking away these circuits and all of these opportunities for people. So, I mean, there's still some orgs out there, if anyone's watching, that wants to become a caster, like High School Star League, that usually regularly needs people, and you'll at least get frequency of games. But like Monty said, you're not going to be getting like professional level of play. So if you want to be an analyst, it's not really the best thing, but it still is experience. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot.
Sure. Okay, so let's dive into LCK. So I want to start a storyline which was super hot at the beginning of the season, because it was one that kind of ended the season interestingly, which is the Africa Freaks. Because when the season started, people were like, holy shit, they're actually going to be really good this season, and it wasn't just like a flash in the pan last season. Maybe they're going to be super good now, but they have kind of drifted down as the weeks have gone on. So where are the Africa Freaks right now, Achilios?
They're in 7th place, I believe.
Okay, that was also like not just like a logistical question as much as like,
okay.
Metaphorically, where are they?
Right now, they're really an up in the air team. We haven't gotten a good grasp, pretty much of the whole league. I think we know that it's very competitive, but as far as where everyone's going to be resting at the end of round 2, of course, it's really like we just don't know. So Africa Freaks right now are in 7th place. I think they're like 4-5. So they've lost more than they've won, and they had like a really rough start, like the first couple games, like just losing here and there, but then coming back and then beating SK Telecom, suddenly looking, significantly stronger and starting to do better. So it seems like they're gonna start climbing back up, but at the same time, there's multiple other teams around them that are starting to climb as well. MVP being a huge one, so. They're in an interesting spot. I think that they can end up in the top 5 again, but I don't know if they're going to be able to break into that top 4, top 3 this split either.
What do you think, Monty? Is there a resurgence coming? Do they stay where they are? Do they go down?
They did take out MVP recently. Obviously, I don't think we can overlook their victory over SK Telecom last week, but I'm not I guess I'm not super high on them right now. I don't know exactly how they're gonna how they're gonna end up when it comes to the end of the season rankings, just because I think Longzhu and MVP will challenge them the longer the season goes on. ESC also only a match back. So I think Genera may not make the playoffs this season with their current form, but depending on patches, it could go back. I think the Freaks do well when they can play more tanky style of top laners, which isn't really the meta at the given time. So we may see them bounce back if the mid lane focus returns. I think Songyun in particular he got a pentakill the other night. Last night, I think that was an important step because Songyun was actually one of their better players in their winning streak at the end of spring. So if he returns to form, maybe they can crack into the wild card match of the playoffs again, looking at 5th or maybe even 4th seed. So they have talent, but putting it together has been troublesome for them.
Okay, so Achilios, is Songyun the star player of their team? Is he the guy, like, put it this way, where does he match up in LCK? Is he approaching elite status? Because, I mean, obviously, as a casual viewer, I only know that they already have a world-class player. His name's Ixu, because actually LoL Esports asked me a while ago if he's the best top player in the world. So, aside from that okay. So who's the star? Whereabouts are they now?
Honestly, it's really hard to pinpoint because they've all looked good and then also looked really bad. Because Snowflower, especially in the start, his Bard play in the first match the Freaking Freaks had was phenomenal. It was like gorgeous to watch. And then he had several games where he just completely tanked out. And through Songyun has had similar experiences. But Songyun, like last split, Songyun was, I would say, like the big person on the team. Like he looked awesome in the AD carry role, but that was also at a time when Kalista was much more in the meta. They still do bring it out, but it's not nearly as receptive in like 6.10 onward. So it's really a niche and a lot of times doesn't find success. So that was like his big one that really made him shine. So he doesn't have that at his disposal anymore. Still having strong performances on the Sivir, getting a pentakill last night. Obviously a really good thing, but I would have to say that right now it's probably Lyra, I think, would be one of the strongest people on the team.
Okay.
He's always been performing well, but now he's especially kind of like starting to come up a little bit more so than he did in the spring split.
Yeah, I also think it's really important to keep in context the Africa Freaks wins and what happened when they went on a winning streak last season, because when we look at the hype around a player like Ixu or Songyun, we have to keep in mind what exactly they were playing. And Ixu and Songyun were direct beneficiaries in the spring season of the fact that Mickey had to be banned out. Or teams thought they had to ban him out, which meant that we saw a lot of Twisted Fate and Zed bans, so pocket bans coming through. And this meant that Ixu and Songyun could get very consistently Poppy and Kalista, which were two of the most popular and powerful picks in the meta at the time. And both of them, despite these picks being frequently banned against other teams, these were their most played champions in the spring season. And I don't think that's true of, I'd have to check, but I don't think that's true of any other top or AD carry player in the league. So once people figured out that you didn't necessarily have to ban these champions, when Zed lost pretty much all viability as a result of nerfs this season, we haven't been seeing the Twisted Fate and the Zed bans anymore. All of a sudden we see more traditional bans against Africa. And because I think of Ixu's lowish champion pool, that hasn't been as much of a threat.
Okay. So people said that, I mean, we said it on this show, possibly the carry tops will become more and more prevalent now. Now, in the past, mainly you did see a lot of tank play from Ixu. In a world where we reverse the jungle a spot again and you have to go to tanks in the jungle, will Lyra suffer if that is going to happen? Will that happen as like a widespread trend, do you think? Because obviously in theory he plays, I mean, before he was playing the Graves last season, he plays the Rek'Sai, these sorts of champions, you know.
Rek'Sai is a pretty tanky jungler, and he's been playing more Rek'Sai than anything else and winning some pretty impressive MVP performances on that. I think with Ixu, the question is, because he keeps going back to Poppy, even though Poppy is not a great pick for him. Now we've seen the Aurelia, which gave a little bit more confidence, I think, in Ixu, because his individual performance on Aurelia was pretty good. But Otherwise, Maokai and Echo are up there for him. At least he's got the Hecarim to fall back on. That was one of the decisive points in their victory over SKT. So that's nice.
So, okay, Achilios. Few teams can beat SK Telecom in a series. I mean, we saw when you went over to MSI, just winning a group stage game off them is pretty good. So how did a Freak of Freaks win a series off SK Telecom?
I mean, they outplayed them. They were playing really well.
Right, so it was an Freak of Freaks comp. Thing is, CLG, you have to just be a Freak of Freaks, and then you beat SK Telecom, right? Okay.
Yeah, they just actually finally started looking cohesive again, the Freak of Freaks. I mean, they did beat them with a 2-0 in Spring Split, so they've shown that they have the potential to do that. SK Telecom's been on a decline. It seems like, I don't know, they're having individual misplays, and it almost seems like burnout could actually be becoming a factor at this moment, because they didn't get much of a break after MSI. They came on such a high note, and suddenly it's starting to decline. I'm just trying to rack my brain, what could be going wrong?
Sure.
Maybe they're starting to get a little bit tired of all of this League of Legends. But I mean, even people that have been very consistent, such as Wolf and Duke this split, they're starting to really rapidly decline. Wolf and Duke's KDAs both have plummeted. Wolf last night, if you watched the game against ESC Ever, he was just face checking brushes, getting killed. Early on in the game, and just overall having really poor performances, and it just seems like the cohesion's not there at the moment. I think SKT just kind of needs to take a good little break here now that round one's over, just clear their heads and be like, okay, round two, this is where we come back, this is where we start performing again, we play like a team, because it just hasn't been there, and a Freak of Freaks in that match they were pretty much on the same page, always making the calls and following up as a team, and then just coming out on top.
Sure. So, okay, Monty, SKT's already lost a bunch of series. Admittedly, last summer, they also lost some series. They worked their way through it. They got better. What do you actually think? Oh, no, actually, I'm thinking of the spring. It was the spring where they had a few
spring.
They lost
in the
one
middle.
series to Samsung.
Okay.
In the summer.
Okay, so what happens this split? Have they declined since MSI? Is it just working their way back into league form? What do you think it is?
I think they struggled at MSI. I think that they had issues, obviously, in the group stage. They had problems, particularly with the jungle and being able to put on adequate pressure. I think that's a problem that is continuing now the deeper we go into this season. Last night we saw Bless just style all over Blank and Bengi. So the pressure they're getting from the jungle is basically non-existent, and a lot of the time their junglers are dying and contributing more to their enemies, their opponents, than they are actually to the team of SKT itself. So I think that's a big problem, because the laning has actually been good. If we take a look at Duke as an excellent laner, Wolf and Bang, when they won the game last night against ESC, it was because they were ahead in lane. But the jungle problem where I feel like they're constantly playing without a jungler, basically, or their jungler is actively helping the other team by giving over kills, that's one of the primary issues. And the secondary issue is that they are going too aggressive. They're playing too aggressively and making a lot of mistakes as a result.
Okay.
They'll tower dive. Faker will die randomly. They're not communicating well about where each other are on the map, which results in them fighting 5v3 or 5v4 frequently.
And that aggression used to pay off really well for them. They used to be able to get away with it, but everybody else is on the rise, so now they can actually deal with that hyper aggressive play that SKT puts out, and they suffer for it. I mean, you mentioned Blank basically not being there and giving kills over game one. He was 0-4-2 on the Rek'Sai, just couldn't do a damn thing. I mean, even Bengi, when he came in for game two, he had at least a positive score line, but it still wasn't a massive carry performance like we were used to seeing from them from at least the start of the split.
So previously, it looked like the way they decided between the two junglers was mainly just what the meta was, and then if someone had a good run of form, they just kept with them. Okay, they stuck with what was working. Obviously, in the Korean way, if people lose games, it's very likely they're at least going to try bringing the other guy in and test him out again and see, either to put pressure on the main jungler or just to test if you're better with the other one. As it stands right now, if you had to pick one of the junglers to go forwards with, who do you think the pick right now should be for SKT?
I think SKT should explore some buyouts of junglers. I think you can look at there's a guy named Flawless, very good mechanics, very aggressive jungler. Maybe you could train him up with the time left before Worlds and see if he can do it. He's in a challenger team called Spenu right now. That'd be a great one. I don't know if this problem is fixable because yes, you're right that we saw it previously with. They would switch off depending on what was needed, but in terms of the meta, and with Rek'Sai and Elise coming back, we were going to see more Bengi. But even Bengi has looked not great. As for when we consider his mechanics right now, and Bengi has been a streaky player mechanically for basically his entire career. He does have pretty big highs and lows. We've seen him in 2014 sort of drop off the face of the earth mechanically, and we may be seeing that again right now.
That's one metaphor. I preferred climb into a dumpster and make that his natural habitat. Another metaphor. So okay, Achilios, what were you going to say?
I was going to say it's just odd that Blank is like simultaneously having the same thing, because he really showed up. Like IEM was like the first time that we saw Blank like really start performing and kind of coming into his own, and then they come back from IAM and they start dominating again, end up in finals for the spring split, take down Rocks Tigers, and it's like, okay, Blank is finally good, and then suddenly it's just now he's on basically the same level of Bengi, and every now and then they inch out above each other, but for the most part they're just like stagnant in just this weird pit that they cannot climb out of, and it's just so bizarre to see that happen. But yeah, like Bengi, I mean, starting off, it seemed like he was going to improve. Like starting off, like his first game, like he had some really weird pathing, and just like was like, wandering around the jungle like a drunk man, like didn't know where the hell he was going.
Was weird.
He's just like swaying back and forth through the jungle. But then the next game that he played is just like, okay, like now this looks a lot cleaner. Like, wow, Bengi's back, the jungle's back. He's gonna take over the starting spot for SK Telecom. And we like hit this point, and now it is just very quickly going down like a fucking roller coaster.
Okay, so there's been teams in the past who could even be very good Korean teams without necessarily having one of the best junglers or a jungler that was super adapted to the current patch. For SK Telecom, what are the consequences if these players stay at this level that they're at the moment? Like, how does it affect their style, do you think?
I think it puts too much emphasis on the lanes, and the enemy jungler is just going to have a field day. It's like they're playing 4v5 in the laning phase, and it's just not going to work, and it's not going to be acceptable. It's not going to beat many of the teams in this league who have more cohesive identities and teamwork. We saw Samsung starting out strong this season, and that was obviously a bit of a surprise because Ruler has been kind of a revelation for the team. But after we go back to a more top lane focused meta, Cuvée may not be the best player for that, but we also see KT rising as a result. So what I'm saying is that if we switch those metas again, and we do go back to a more mid or 80 carry focused meta, then Samsung's likely to improve. Perhaps KT will go down at that stage. But regardless, there are going to be enough teams that are meta appropriate to, I think, secure a nice position for teams that are not SK Telecom, because there are going to be teams that suit the meta better that have superior teamwork.
Okay. What do you think of the carries of SK Telecom? So jungle issues aside, how do the carries stack up at the moment? Who's in form? Who do we expect more from?
Well, I think the carries right now are in great form. If we actually look at just raw damage stats, Faker and Bang are at the top of the table, both in the top 5 in the league when it comes to damage per minute. So these guys are definitely delivering. Again, it's not the individual performance. They're frequently doing very well in the laning phase. It's that they take bad fights. They take bad fights. or they're behind, and that's tough to recover from.
Yeah, that's where they really start falling behind. I mean, last night was the Cloud Drake whole debacle that happened for SK Telecom. Just putting them even further behind. But yeah, they just keep wanting to fight, and it's again, like as we mentioned earlier, that they're playing way too aggressively. They just need to tone it back. They need to take a little note from Jin Air and like CJ and just take a step back, ride the wave until you hit that like 35-40 minute point, and then fight. Just play the lanes out, because they usually do win the lanes. But Bang and Faker definitely doing well, but I would say Duke, considering how he started this season or the split, has just probably been the biggest decline outside of the jungle, at least in my opinion.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's strange though, because if everyone tells me, right, you're going to now be able to play Aurelia, all these carry tops, you'd be like, oh great, this is Duke's time, right? Now it's his turn to take over and carry the fuck out of his lane, etc. What's the issue? Do you think just purely individual form?
It's just I don't know. Monty, you want to go first on this one? I really don't even know what's wrong. I mean, the one that stands out in my mind is just poor choices from time to time, because like the Fiora is just this bad memory that I have for him, because that was a really poor performance. But even trying like Rumble last night, it just didn't work out. I feel like he needs to stick with the ones that he's very good at. Trundle's the one that comes to my mind, because he has just completely crushed people with that champion. But sometimes when he tries these new ones, it's just not working out.
Yeah, I think his laning phase has been good, and his Aurelia was the reason why. It was one of the major reasons why they pulled out a victory last night. That has not been the major cause of SK Telecom's downfall, because on an individual level, again, the laning phase Duke's performance is excellent. He has been late to team fights again more consistently. Started out the season looking better, coordinating well with the teleport. That's sort of fallen off again, back to where it was sort of pre-MSI, and that's not a good place for them to be in. Again, his coordination with the rest of the team, sometimes he's just not at these fights that happen, and whether that's on Duke or that's on the rest of his team not giving him adequate information, I don't know. But it certainly is happening one more time.
So in terms of individual players, obviously a big name for SK Telecom is still Bang. Now, I saw an interesting discussion, because I actually read Kelsey Moses' article about it, where she tried to compare and contrast Deft and Bang and ask who is the best AD carry right now. And I noticed there was some backlash from people who, I can't know how much they watch LPL, who tried to just paint it as like, oh, it's just because LPL casters want to believe they have some super duper world's best player as well, and they're playing up Deft. Obviously Bang is like the supreme leader, no one can challenge him. Where do you stand on this at the moment? How is Bang doing, and is he the best AD carry in the world? Is that your...
I honestly can't really have an opinion on this, because I have not watched enough LPL this season to...
Now that's no fun. Listen, I'm revoking your Reddit license. You're no longer allowed to post. You betrayed everything the site stands for.
Watching LPL is what Reddit stands for? I could have...
No, it's not watching LPL, but giving a very strong opinion, and that everyone who does watch LPL is definitely wrong about LPL. That's what Reddit stands for, okay?
In that case, Deft is the best in the world. I also don't watch... pretty much any China.
To your knowledge, is Bang the best AD carry, though?
I think that, yes, he probably is the best AD carry in Korea right now, because on the other top teams, like Ruler's a rookie and has shown some weakness in terms of his positioning and overextending on the map. We look at some of the other top teams. KT, I certainly wouldn't say that about Arrow. Prey, I guess, is the other argument that you could make, because Prey is actually having an extremely good season. Okay. Individually, so maybe you could say Prey would be another person to include in that very short list. Yeah,
if he's playing Jin and Jin only, maybe Fury inches in like fourth or fifth. Okay. But yeah, Prey and Bang, and then probably Arrow after that.
I don't know. I don't know about Arrow. I have mixed feelings about Arrow.
He's been doing better. Maybe you could put Ruler in there, but I think Arrow is probably about top 4 or 5 at this point. I don't know. He's been doing a lot better.
He has been. That is true.
Okay, so you mentioned Fury. Now, obviously, that was one of the storylines of Longju last season, which was because he was like banned or suspended or whatever, he couldn't play initially. But from his days in the past, he had a lot of hype around him. People said this guy was really good. He's like an up-and-coming player, etc. As a team, what the fuck happened to Longju Gaming? Like that whole thing of like, they could be the new best team in Korea. Oh shit, we've actually seen them play. They're terrible. Fuck. What happened now? Any hope left?
Every week seems to have more hope for Longju. It's super
like
hard to tell where
CJ, though.
Yeah, it's. Oh man, like that's such a hard question to answer because Longju, you keep hoping that they can get it together, and you keep seeing certain performances by them where they actually look like they may be getting something done. They beat Samsung, and they were like, okay, what's going to happen now? And then they got 2-0'd by the Tigers, and then they got 2-0'd by SK Telecom. So the read on Longju, it's just a complete mystery in my eyes. 2-0'd by MVP also, so they've lost their last 3 matches consecutively.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that maybe now the hope is gone, but hard to say. Every time you think they're dead, they somehow manage to scrape an impressive win out.
Yeah, they were just the team that, like, at the start of last split, everybody freaked out because they just sold themselves with talent, and everybody's like, oh my god, they have Flame, and they have all of these players that are, like, you know, historically really good, Coco, oh my god. And that's all they had was just, like, face value, no cohesion, no teamwork, and they haven't been able to piece together a working roster. Still, even cutting down to 7 members instead of 10, they now have, a smaller player pool than CJ, who I think has the most the biggest roster right now with 9. They still haven't been able to figure out like what the problem is and how they can get things to work. They tried Crash finally the other day. Yeah. That didn't work out. It's just they just seem like they just don't even know what the issue is. Like, they are the team, they're looking at it, and they still just say, like, I don't know what we're doing wrong.
Are players like Chaser, like Coco, still top players?
Coco's at least been doing better on Vladimir, but the synergy just hasn't been there. It seems like when you put these two guys together that they just can't come up with any kind of, as Achilios is saying, teamwork or cohesion, and it's hard to pinpoint their issues. Again, Fury looking better gave hope, at least for Longju fans, because on the surface, you take any of their players and you say, okay, this guy is actually objectively, in isolation, a pretty damn good player, but it doesn't work when they actually play together for whatever reason. Last season, too, Expression was actually one of the most dominant laners in the top in the entire region, but that didn't actually translate to victories because they can't coordinate themselves well enough to pull out wins.
How much of it is like players themselves who might be good just don't fit together? Like specific positions maybe don't work, or how much is like stylistic, the overall style of the team, the identity isn't really like logical or doesn't work for the players?
I don't think they have an identity as a team. I don't think they ever really established that because they've been just so scattershot in their approach to the game. Yeah. I think that if anything, they need to take a step back and say, okay, we're just going to work on one style of team composition or strategy and see if they can develop from there, because right now it's just kind of a mess, and they're trying too many things. At least last season, when they picked up a few wins, what they were good at was poke compositions. We got to see the Jace come out when they had some weird, like some strange sort of off-meta pocket picks. That was what they were best at. But we haven't seen as much of that this season for whatever reason.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Achilles, what's your take on this?
I was gonna say, like, I had some hopes for them coming into this split, because in spring, it seemed like Longju was basically like a poorer version of TSM at the time, because they had Yellow Star, they had Svenskeren and Hotzer, and Double F, and Bjergsen. So it was the same kind of thing. It was like, we have all these big names, superstar roster, we're gonna kill it. And they really started off, and they were struggling really heavily. Yeah, they ended up making it into the final, losing to CLG. So they were able to kind of bounce back, but now coming in, having that dominance. That's what I was sort of maybe not to the same level that TSM has dominance in North America, but I was sort of hoping that Longzhou would have a stronger performance and actually have more than a single match win. But they just, like Monty said, they don't have an identity. They don't have any one thing that they're good at. So they just completely keep suffering every time they try something new. It just fails.
Yeah, because to me, when you look at Longzhou last season, and even this season with still some of the great players they have, that to me, they're the ultimate, like, fantasy armchair GM team where every person who has Twitter account thinks that they know how they could fix it, And so I actually think what we should do is, seeing as they're obviously not going to be a competitive team, and they're definitely never going to win LCK, you've spent all this money already, so you have to go full NA. You have to go the NA route, and you have to take a play from the playbook of your old mate, Steve Arneset, Liquid 112, which is, if you can't actually succeed in the game, because that's very difficult, there's a lot of moving factors, a lot of variables that are all, what you at the very least should try and do is market the fuck out of those players, right? And you have to get fans on your side. So first of all, we need a reality TV show. So every week it's like, oh,
people
Chaser.
will watch it because of Lost.
Yeah, see, it's everyone's watching like, Chaser, you worried, mate? You just lost this game. Maybe Crash is coming in for you next week. He's like, he's having a hard time. Look, he's not eating as much kimchi today. Maybe, he's going off into his room. What could be happening there? Sad music plays. Then the coach goes in. We're going to get through this together. And then here's the way that they really maximize it, right? They get as much social media presence as possible by turning it into sort of like an old school reality TV show. The fans get to vote every week for who they actually play in the games. And then, because there's such rabid fan bases of these really good players, then suddenly, like 1 week, like the team's not doing quite well enough, like the whole crowd is swayed the other direction, like mass killings just erupted within the crowd, blood for the blood god, people are screaming, and then in comes, all of a sudden, oh my god, who is that? That's Crash's music. In comes Crash for no reason, he's just stuck in the team, right? And then the zealots of Chaser are battling backwards and forwards who remember the good old days. I think this is another approach you could go with, because at the moment it's just sad seeing someone actually try to play this like an actual League of Legends team and just lose lots of games in League of Legends. Do they ever come back? Do they ever turn the corner? Can you write them off?
Probably.
I don't know if you can like write off a team that has that level of talent from its players. I think it is hard to completely throw them out, but
I think for when I say that, I'm saying specifically for the remainder of this split. I think you can say, like, you know what, it's probably not going to go so well, but can you stick with them and actually turn it around? Probably, but I think that there needs to be major structural changes.
They need to look for a shot caller, because that must be their main problem, because Chaser was doing a lot better when he was on Jin Air, where he had probably Trace doing a lot of the shot calling from the Jin Air side of things. And for some reason, there's nobody with an active voice who seems to be directing the team within the game. Yeah. So maybe you make a perhaps what would appear to be an on-paper downgrade in one of the positions, but you then fill it with a shot caller instead that will be able to pick up the slack.
Okay. So let's have a discussion about Rocks Tigers then. If there's all these problems in the league, and SK Telecom, maybe this is finally the time where they don't just turn it all around and win anyway and have that really inevitable ending. What is this, when Rocks Tigers just remains a really sick team and everyone else trips over, and finally they actually get to cross the finish line? Dick Dastardly wins the race, the wacky race. No one screws him at the last minute. The blonde-haired guy of SK Telecom doesn't just win just because he's popular. Is this finally the season for Rocks Tigers, Monty?
I hope it is. That's what I'll say. I really do hope it is, because of how many times the Tigers have taken second place to SK Telecom. They've done it 3 times now. I think that it would be great to see them have a championship. They certainly have a lot of talent. Prey has been going off. Smeb has been going off in a big way this season. But they're not performing at the same level, I would say, individually as we've seen previously, because Peanut had a little bit of a dip, although he seems to be getting a little bit of a resurgence now because the team style changed so much. Last season, they were not about wards at all. They were bottom of the league when it came to warding. We saw them playing for Vision with their champions instead, playing very aggressively, controlling the pace of the game, knowing where the enemy jungler was because they would force him into lane because their lanes were going so well that the jungler had to come and help, or Peanut would just find them in the jungle and kill them. We saw incredible performances from Peanut, such as playing an entire game without giving the enemy one buff, which I've never seen before ever.
Okay.
And this season, Peanut and Gorilla is now third in total deaths in the league, and he's only one behind Haru and Hachani, who are tied for number 1. So he's been getting caught out a lot more than I'm used to seeing from Gorilla, and his individual performance hasn't been there to the same degree.
Okay.
I think that it definitely could be finally their split, barring SK Telecom doesn't just meteorically rise back to the top and then crush them in the finals. Because the only teams that they've lost to are SK Telecom and Samsung, who have been on a bit of a dip since the start of their split, where it looked like they might have been the top team in LCK. But the only other teams that have really given them trouble is KT. They lost a game, but then there was the odd one, which was CJ taking a game off of them, but they basically cheesed them with the Cassiopeia and the Hecarim picks. It was the first time that we saw those the split, so they were relatively unprepared for that, I suppose.
Okay.
So, right now, losing a game to KT, losing to Samsung and SKT at the time with how they were performing, I think it's perfectly fine. They're definitely stepped it up. They're definitely not where they were. The dominance that we saw all through spring last year, Peanut especially, is not nearly as commanding in the jungle. But overall, I think that Rox is in a really good spot. And if SKT continues to decline, I think the only team that will really contest them is going to be KT Rolster.
Okay. So I remember that when Peanut first came onto the scene, when he was over in Najin, everyone who was a Najin fan, because they were the long Jew of their day, who had all the sick players and never got it together, everyone hailed him as this might be the answer. And he had a few games that was pretty good, but people's excuse back then when he didn't play as well was he hasn't been blooded enough, he hasn't had enough games, he's not been made the proper starting player, you got to give him time with the compositions of the different players that were going to be in the team. Then he came over to Rox, and obviously it was fantastic early on. Look, they were super dominant, he was doing super, super well, but I noticed there's always an assumption, which is just human nature, which is when someone looks utterly dominant, they don't just win games, they dominate and totally crush their opponents, and they're doing something that looks very, very hard and only they can do, we naturally, for some reason, often assign them all other aspects of the game that might seem easier. They could play standard champions that aren't like that. They could play a default style. That's where it feels like he's kind of had more of an issue, because Peanut, or Hoonie of the Jungle, as I call him, apparently has to totally destroy you, or his impact's not as good. He can't just be a normal jungler. What is the prognosis for Peanut right now, Monty?
I think that this is a time where Peanut is adjusting his style of play to be more long-term meta resilient. I think I personally had problems with the way that Peanut was playing last season because I saw it as something that could collapse if the metagame actually shifted to a more tanky jungle style. And that was always the concern. We kept saying that on the broadcast. It's okay, Peanut's doing great, but what happens if he can't just carry everybody with Kindred and with Nidalee? What does that world look like for the Rox Tigers when they can't play this aggressively and just out-skirmish everybody early on with high-damage champions? And they've completely 180'd. Peanut, who was the first Blood King of the entire league last season, has dropped pretty precipitously in his personal statistics for First Blood. I will check on that real quick. Right now, he's at 29% First Blood contribution. And last season, he was, I think, top of the league in that statistic. Which is, he was 66%. So his number of First Bloods that he's been getting has been halved, that's a big change. His warding has gone way up. And I think that ultimately this is going to make Peanut a better League of Legends player on the whole, but it is going to cause him to struggle in the near term.
Okay. Still, Rox Tigers is one of the best teams in the league, looking very strong. What is the overall strength of Rox Tigers, Achilios?
I think it's this same thing that they talked about, in last split. I think that it's still just that they respond to each other pretty much on the dot. As soon as somebody says okay, TP here, they just go for it. they trust in each other and they react very much like we've been seeing from like Ruler on Samsung. Like he just responds. Like the team needs him there, and he's there. All of Rock's Tigers has been like that for a while. It was struggling at the start of the split. The cohesion seemed like it slipped a little bit, but now they've gotten back to that point where it's like, okay, we're gonna dive bottom, like Smeb TP in, and like he'll just hit it. Like doesn't ask a question, doesn't say like, oh, how many are there? Like he's just trust that the team, trust that his bot lane knows that they can pull off the dive. He comes in for it, and then they just start sweeping through. I think that's their biggest strength. They're friends with each other, so like even the environment like back at the team house is going to be really good. Whereas a lot of other teams, especially when you're struggling, you would think that those relationships start falling apart because blame starts arising between the team members. Rocks, even at the start, losing their first couple games and looking rough, they've still kind of persevered, been a good unit and friends with each other, and you can tell that they're always just having fun with the game, even when they fuck up or something. Like they still are enjoying the game, and I think that culmination of just being able to actually have fun and then trust each other is really what gives them success. Plus, they're also just really fucking good.
Sure. Is Smeb clear-cut the best top laner in LCK?
Right now, yes. In this meta, yes.
The only thing that would make me question that is Someday.
I think Someday's the better all-around player because if we look at Someday's tank play, it really is special. Like it's very strong. So, but in this meta for carry tops, I think Smeb has been absolutely excellent.
I would inch it out a bit to Smeb, but I think that Someday is very much on his heels because even Smeb in tank meta was doing really well, especially with champions like Poppy. Just stealing Barons, getting solo kills constantly in lane. Even tank Echo outplaying people in like 1v2 scenarios, coming up with double kills. I think that he has shown a prowess on both sides. But I'd say that they're pretty neck and neck, but Smeb going to be inching out just a little bit above Someday.
Okay. See, I feel like Doa missed a trick there. He needs to up his writing game because with all those games of Poppy last split, especially people like Expression who just spam the fuck out of it, he should have been able to work in a Game of Thrones milking the Poppy type reference at some point during the split. That should have been primary playbook material there. It's an anesthetic quality. Should have gone with that. So I'm just saying, though, step your game up, mate. It can't all just be about Transformers. We're on to your references now. We're starting to get that playbook going, mate. You've got to keep it fresh. You've got to be like a rapper, You can't be going back on your old mixtape material on your new album. You've got to come up with new stuff, okay? So, okay. What would be the counterpoint as we go forwards in the season that might keep Rocks from winning? Because you see, that's the problem, Achilios. My heart's Rocks Tigers has become my personal Katie Rolster to Monte Cristo. I keep believing every season that they're going to do it this time. Finally, they will crush the heretic SK Telecom. They will this time. Smeb will obviously, who is my like new vicarious way of believing that Flame's still a really good player. I just pretend that he's Flame basically. I have that old theme tune I used to have in my head that like, let's watch a Flame game, I love you. And then anyway, so we're watching Smeb play. He's doing awesome. He's super sick. He's definitely better than that Someday guy. I can always wait for that guy to fail. So he does fail. Ha ha ha. It's horrible when your favourite player fails, isn't it? Now it's time for the finals. Oh great, I'm sure Smeb will win, be the MVP. This will go great. And it never happens, okay? So just let me down easy, Achilles. When it doesn't happen, what would be the main reason that will stop it from happening this time?
I think that right now the thing that would upset them the most would be another massive meta shift.
Well, those never happen, so don't worry about those just before the playoffs.
Or before Worlds.
Okay.
With zero competitive games on the patch that Worlds is being played on. Really good job last year, Riot. Great patching system.
Yes, so I think that would be the biggest thing. I know that they've talked about loosely. Obviously, we don't know like when it's going to happen, but Assassins is going to be the next big rework that they want to bring in, and that could impact them a little bit. And if it does move away from a carry top lane, Smeb, he's still very strong, as I mentioned, on tanks, but he's going to be not as strong as he would be on being able to play this Aurelia, the Rumble that he's shown. I think that's a big pick for him, but I think it's really just going to be a massive meta shift that would kind of disrupt the Rocks Tigers, because I think that's the only thing that's really going to allow for them to not continue excelling in the current state of things. If AD carry suddenly gets shaken up and we go back to like Jinx and Tristana, will Prey be able to succeed on those? Because he's been having a lot of success on picks that are more poke heavy or utility, like the Ashe and the Jhin, opening up with the Enchanted Crystal Arrow, allowing for the team to get on top of them, using the Curtain Call to slow out members. If it has to be a more aggressive in-your-face AD carry like the Jinx, very upfront kite heavy, how is he going to perform on that? I don't know. So if we shift back to something like that, I think that could upset Rocks Tigers. Right now, though, I think that they're in an excellent spot. I think they're going to continue to move up the standings and probably retake that first place spot that KT just kind of plucked away from them.
Okay.
Yeah, I also it's important to look at the drafts too when we talk about the Tigers, because in their games against SK Telecom, it was pretty early on in the season, and they had one of the worst drafts ever. I mean, they were just absolutely, the fact that they did the Vladimir Swain thing twice in a row, I think they seriously misread the meta and made
I think
mistakes.
the Echo Jungle was the worst part.
That
came out. That was the worst thing.
It was all bad. It was all bad. So they had some lows when it came to, I think, their coaching staff. Anofe is normally very good at identifying strong picks. Had a bit of a hiccup there, and so I think that was a big part of their losses. Also, again, the tank meta, the carry meta coming back certainly does suit Smeb quite well. So I hope the Tigers come back. I think the biggest thing has been Cry this season for them, because when we looked at the losses the Rocks Tigers always had in the finals to SKT, the common factor was Kuro, who was so great during the regular season, regular leader in total kills, contributing a lot to the team. When he plays against Faker, he is terrible. Every single time, he just chokes massively against Faker. And I think that them having a player like Cry now, where they have some Kuro choke insurance in a final match if they have to go with another mid laner, because throughout Kuro's entire career, when it's on Najin's sword, getting dumpstered by Faker in that famous like Ori versus Yasuo outplay that everybody has seen from Faker in the NLB finals, like this is... They had to get something to overcome Kuro's mental block, and at least there's another option on the team now for them to go to.
Yeah, but not only that, though, but if things don't improve in the jungle for SK Telecom, I think that does give a big edge to Rocks Tigers, because they can utilize Peanut to out-pressure Faker. I know that Kuro in the 1v1 will lose, but if Blank and Bengi are continuously failing and not able to create pressure, then Peanut will be able to just get Kuro ahead, at least on paper, get Kuro ahead, and then have Faker just be, at least go even with him and have him be close to a non-factor, unless he gets something massive that he can make plays on, like the Azir, that he still likes to go to. But I think that does give them innately a bit more of an edge. If they played against SK Telecom today, I think that would be the thing that helps them win.
But that's what I thought too about the finals in the spring season, was that Peanut was going to absolutely take a dump on Blank. But what happened was Peanut also was one of the major choking factors in the finals in the spring season. So
Peanuts have known to be a major choking factor.
That's true.
So, there we go. Keep going.
But
don't let that stop you.
I didn't see that same level of aggression from Peanut in the finals, because my cat meows a bunch. Shut up, cat. I haven't seen that same aggression from Peanut in the finals that I saw in the season. So while I would normally agree with you, when push came to shove in the spring, it wasn't Peanut showing up. It was Blank showing up, and that was I think a big surprise.
Okay. So the time has arrived, okay? I've built up to it. I didn't want to just jump right in. It's like Game of Thrones seasons. You don't just go with the best episode straight out the gate. You're going to really build your way up to it. And then, crucially, you should try to usually have an episode where it's really good and then it goes downhill from there and everything just resolves in the most boring, predictable way possible. So along those lines, it's time to talk about KT Rolster. So this could be the time, Monty. But here's the caveat. The only teams that have beaten KT Rolster is Rocks, Tigers, and SK Telecom, who they definitely won't have to go through to win the actual league. So what do you think of KT right now?
They're back doing KT things. They have weird, wonderful, unique strategies. We've seen them play the Jhin very well. They're coordinated as a team. One thing that is very interesting about KT when I was doing my research the other day is that they're one of the actual most meta-immune teams in the league. Do they have a star player is the question. It is Someday, but when we look at Someday's performance, he's great in all these different metas, which is one of the reasons why I say they're meta-immune. The other factor is they have basically even damage distribution, which is actually pretty unique for a professional team, that they tend to stay very close together in percentage of team's damage. What this means is that Someday is higher than normal, and Fly is usually an Arrow are a bit average or slightly below average, but it does make it so they were basically identical at 25%, 25%, 25% in the spring season. It has skewed a little bit more. There's about a percentage and a half difference this time around. But any meta that you put KT in, they're not going to get hurt by. It's not like they have this one big carry that they're super reliant on, and they can't adjust if the meta shifts to a top lane carry or mid lane carry, whatever. It just means that they're sort of good in all metas, but never, I think, great, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
This is their opportunity to be great. I mean, they've been doing really well. Arrow's been stepping up his game. Fly playing way more aggressively than ever.
But Arrow's been stepping up, yes, but Arrow is still statistically, and when we look at his play, I would say he's sort of just an average Korean AD carry.
Well, I mean, the joke would be he's still the second best AD carry on KT roster, right? So.
Right, of course.
Well, but I mean, even you mentioned it though. He's a very economical AD carry. He's very good at that.
Yes, he doesn't take any resources. So if you look at the percentage of the team gold that he takes versus his damage output, yeah, he looks great. So he's like a low economy AD carry player. That doesn't mean that he's going to be as big of a threat of actually carrying a game as a player like Bang or as a player like Prey. So I think that's the problem with KT, is that they lack the ability to sort of go to the next level with a star carry player. Like, they don't have that person. But what they do to make up for it is have excellent teamwork, excellent coordination, and really weird strategies that only they play. The only Aurelion Soul team, Zillion banned like all fucking season so far because nobody can actually handle the Zillion when it comes out, and they're the only team that does that. So they've been in an interesting place.
Yeah, it did make it through for Jhin Air, but they didn't go for it. They didn't go for the Zillion.
Yeah,
but
it's going to come back, though.
Yeah, it's an inevitability. Once people actually figure out how to ban against KT in the current meta, I'm sure they'll pull out the Zillion, and everybody will be like, oh, wait, that pick exists. Shit.
Yeah, forgot about that one.
And then they lose, but I don't know. I have high hopes for them. I mean, they're buffed because it's the summer. They're starting off really well. The meta's great for Someday, and Score's been doing really well getting Someday ahead. But like you said, even with even outside of the picks, like their cheeky plays that they've made are just awesome, and like not many other teams do that. Someday just sitting in the brush waiting for all of I forget which team that was. Was it Samsung? It was I think, but all of them to like move forward, and then they just TP top or they just rotate top and they kill the top laner. Like that stuff is just awesome. So they're still like coming out with these like new unique plays that nobody else is doing to get themselves ahead. And I think with the combination of Score and Someday, they're in a good spot, because like, I mean, I'll agree, like Arrow's not amazing, he's not Bang, but he is very consistent. And as long as they can have that consistency and he's not feeding, and Fly as well, you know, as long as they're not feeding out of the ADC and mid positions, Someday and Score can just take hold of the game.
Isn't that if we add this all up though, isn't that the concern once we get ahead and we go to, let's say they go to the playoffs with the top seed, is that the problem, I've noticed this in actual general sports, probably the worst position to be in is when you're the team that like the style's working really well, like you've got a really good strategical like grip on the game. Everyone's it's a real team with it. We're all just working together. The problem with that is when you get like deep in the playoffs, if any player starts to choke or have issues, that's where usually like the star player can carry you through. So. Yeah. Like isn't the concern here if we were talking about Kuro with Rocks? Like, what happens if Fly shits the bed in the playoffs?
Well, hopefully Someday can carry because
Someday has to carry.
Yeah.
I mean, if Someday gets on something like the Aurelia and it gets ahead, or even the Trundle, like he's just hard carried with that champion many a time. So it would come down to him because Arrow's probably not going to be the one that puts the game on his back and carries it to victory. Score maybe could, depending on what he's on, but it really is just Someday would be in the limelight all of a sudden.
I mean, obviously the meta probably will change, but if we were in a world where they still could play Vladimir mid every game, they could play Arian Sol, all that stuff, couldn't these champions be like half decent to stay safe in the lane and make Fly not have issues?
Fly's Victor is actually quite good.
Yeah, his Victor's really good, and again, he's not even playing it defensively.
Yeah, his strength is in the pocket picks, right? Because he just creates these weird scenarios where you have to ban champions against them that you wouldn't ban otherwise, or you have this threat that they're going to play in a very strange way that you actually have a hard time practicing for because other teams simply do not play the same kind of League of Legends as KT does.
Okay. Yeah. So in general for this team, does Score still like define the style of the team?
Score and Someday. Score has been actually really excellent, and that's where they've gotten their power, I think, a lot this season, is that ever since the top lane meta took hold, we've seen an increase in Score's desire to be ganking in the top side and in making those advantages appear for Someday. And Someday actually has, I think, like a 40+% first blood statistic right now, 45%. Yeah. Smeth has 38%, but for the most part, we're talking about 10 to 20% more first bloods for Someday than other top laners. So that's a huge differential right there to work with. And I think that's one of their biggest strengths right now, is that they have a very good read on the meta and they know where Score needs to be on the map to make an effect.
Okay, Achilios.
He's in the right place.
Pretending Monty doesn't exist for a moment here. What chances do you actually think KT Roast has for the whole season? Like, with how the lay of the land looks right now, like similar to the Rocks Tigers scenario, is this an open chance to potentially win a season of LCK?
I think that there is a chance. I think that they're, at least in my opinion, right now, I'd say that they're pretty much guaranteed top 3. I fully expect them to go to Worlds. Whether or not they're going as the champions, I don't know. I think that there is an opportunity, but it's going to come down to, will the meta change? Because if the meta changes, I think that they'll still be in a good spot, and that could upset Rocks Tigers. And then does SK Telecom start returning to form? If SKT comes back in, I feel like we might just have another scenario where they play off in the semifinal, and all of a sudden it's a 3-0 for SK Telecom, and KT just goes like, man, what happened? How did we get here? But
Faker's like, I happen, bitch. You ever heard of me before? Don't call it a comeback. Okay.
Yeah, barring something like that, which we'll know within the first couple weeks, I guess, as far as SK Telecom, whether or not they're going to slip up and fall further down the standings, or if they're going to maintain like that top 4 spot that they're in right now. Barring that and the meta swap, I think the KT roster will probably end up in 2nd or 3rd place.
So Monty,
but it is possible.
Monty, I've just been saving this topic till the right time, okay? So we've just discussed, like, KT's in a good place, that everything's looking great for them. Maybe this could be their season. Who knows? Maybe it could. I'm not going to say it isn't. So ESPN released their power rankings, and okay, so
how many of these has there been so far?
Listen, guys, good news. Rocks Tigers, number 1. Number 2, Edward Gaming. Okay, bold. Putting a Chinese team in there against all the country. Okay, very bold. Number 3, TSM. Keep going down. Wait a minute. Number 3, TSM. Let me just check it. Yep, that's right. Number 3, TSM. Number 4, KT Rolster. So, Monty, respond, please. Number 3 team in the world, TSM. Okay, what do you think of this?
Well, I'm just thinking of Poncer versus Someday.
Yeah. I mean, Duke? Like, I don't know. Where do you start with this one? It's not a good look for ESPN. The odds that this team is that high up in the world is just very low. I do think the TSM is a good team, and they probably deserve a spot in the top 10, but I don't think you could reasonably put them in the top 3 right now. That does seem a bit overbold.
Oh, what's funny is the actual blurb for the TSM part even says, is TSM, is top 5 in the world a bit too premature? And then they've actually put them 3rd. So it's like, well, I mean, it's almost like your own text is warning you there. It's like an omen, like, that might be bold. Fuck it, top 3, doubling down, mate. Just going all in. I believe. Put it this way, to put it in context for you, okay? I'm now going to bring in, see, I knew we'd miss him, Monty. I'm now going to bring in the all-time king of analytical content shitposting, Miri, okay? Because even Miri didn't go as nuts as to put Fnatic as high up in the global one, as far as I know.
You're part of your retweet posse, your journalist retweet brigade. Is he letting you down?
Yeah, here's the thing. Here's the thing. No, Monty, because actually he's fulfilled what I want from Fionn. Fionn's very good when he ignores the little details and just tells me stories. And these stories are entertaining and so he's telling me stories again. The problem is because he's trying to do it analytically, he's just lying to me, okay? But put it this way, okay? Even when Fnatic was in their heyday of 18-0, they were only ranked 4th by the great Miri, okay? Even he didn't go and put them 3rd and just bang them ahead of everyone. Like, I'm just saying, listen.
Look, I think
you were supposed to be the chosen one, Fionn, and you've become worse than fucking Miri. So get your shit together.
I think TSM's a good team, but I do think you do have to take the regional, the regions into context here. And if you actually begin to think about TSM versus some of these teams from Korea and China, I'm not sure that it's reasonable based on the history of the region to actually say that makes any kind of sense. So,
what do you think,
I would say even RNG should be in there above them. So it's odd. I could agree. Top 10 perhaps, but definitely not 3.
So here's the other part I saved, Monty, because it's all about, like, in a good plot, okay? The key detail, I'm following like the Raymond Chandler approach here. You can never trick someone. You can never tell them a lie, which then changes out to be false, like a camera tricks or something that shows something. What the secret to revealing a good plot is that you have to be able to reveal details that the person didn't know, but that then change everything and make the plot, even more intense. So the detail I'm going to reveal to you now, Monty, is I asked you just straight up what you think of like TSM ahead of KT against all this. Here's the little final frisson, the little niche detail that makes it even more beautiful, Monty, is that everyone in positions number 1 to 10 is categorized as world contenders. So TSM, world contenders. They will contend for the world championship. That's what that means.
I suppose that's probably literally true, meaning that...
Okay, you've actually become evil now. Okay,
they will in fact be at Worlds.
Okay, Johnny Cochran, but back in the actual subjective, qualitative world of making analysis, they're not going to win Worlds.
No, absolutely not.
How far do you think they could go?
I don't know yet. I haven't seen enough. Like, I will wait until we get closer to Worlds to actually make some kind of prediction based on their performance, especially in playoffs. I think I would not expect them to do as well as Fnatic. So, like, I suppose with a lucky bracket, maybe we could talk about semis, but
sure,
maybe quarters.
I mean, one of the things you have to realize about their team as well is they've got a bunch of players who haven't really had that much international success. So, okay, Bjergsen's had like some decent international success. Doublelift's gotten to Worlds finally again, but then didn't go that well last time for him. Svenskeren played half of a Worlds, and the other half was just watching. He spectated half. He did a bit of both. Hauntzer, obviously, again, not really experienced there because he was stuck in hell in Gravity. And Biofrost is an absolute rookie. So it's very different to play against your own region than to go and try and play against the best teams in the world and then win the fucking world championship. So listen, you could do it. You could be like, I mean, obviously SK Telecom did it as all rookies, so you could do it maybe, well, except Impact, I guess. But yeah, that's the problem. I mean, as we've been discussing in the LCK scenario, players who are even good in the regular season, the performance tends to degrade in the playoffs unless you're like literally one of the best players of all time. Those are the only players who really hold up under pressure. So personally, I mean, I don't care if people get mad at this. Yeah, I wouldn't put them going past the quarterfinals. I'd say that's a reasonable place for them to go. Get out of groups, okay, well done. You're one of the better Western teams. Probably go out in the quarterfinals, you know, unless you get some Origin-esque crazy luck where you manage to get like Flash Wolves.
Yeah, we also live in a world now where the Taiwanese teams are competitive at an international level, which makes it even harder for the Western teams to go far. Yeah. Also, I just don't think we're going to see the same like choke fest from G2 or the other top European teams that we saw at MSI, because I think they will take Worlds seriously and they'll come in with a much better preparation.
See, that's the big concern to me. I mean, obviously last Worlds was very much skewed by the brand new meta, etc. No one had played. But I do think an element of what happened last year at Worlds is going to be present in future Worlds, which is that now that the LMS region is so competitive, the problem is, it goes like this. Let's say you do have a great set of games like an Origin or, let me think, Cloud9 do. Let's say you get some upset wins yourself. Well, guess what? Your peer group of other teams who can fuck with you is so huge that you're running through the minefield as well, just like the Korean and Chinese teams are. So you might get a sick win, but you have to then close the deal and win the games you're supposed to win. So then for all you know, you go against Flash Wolves and you think, oh, that's okay, they're coming out as the second best, and then suddenly they fuck you up, you know, and now it's like, it's going to be hard. Like, getting out of groups is going to be a challenge at this point in time. You can't take it for granted. Okay.
Yeah, it is. Even the Rocks Tigers last year ended up in second place out of their group, and they were a finalist in the tournament because they lost both of their games to the Flash Wolves. So you do, I think, have to take these teams seriously, and the competition is much more fierce now. It's also the European teams had a very, very good showing at Worlds. Like 2 teams in the semis, like that's super good. Okay. I don't think that's going to be something that is repeated.
I told everybody not to sleep on the Flash Wolves at Worlds last year, and everybody was just like, "Oh, it's fine. They're from the LMS." I was like, "You got to be kidding me, dude!" Like, I talked to Coach Chris or whatever at CLG at the time, and I said like, "Hey, if you need any information on the Flash Wolves, like, let me know." Like, you know, I cast the LMS finals and whatnot, so I've seen them play a bunch. And he's just like, "Oh yeah, okay, I think we're good." And then they lost. So I was like, well, you should have taken the offer.
Ironically, that was also his problem. He thought they were good. So he thought that CLG was good, and that turned out not to be true. So there was wisdom in his words. The key thing is, though, he actually left that area of room where he was a reasonable man. He didn't say we are good. He just said, I think we're good. So as long as it's just your thoughts and you recognise that your own subjective reality is not objective reality, maybe we can never access objective reality, like CLG and TSM fans. So, okay, here's the thing, Achilios. Because you have to leave the country any minute, not just like mandated, like you're not actually being thrown out of the country, you can pick which team we talk about last. So I'll give you some options, okay? You can talk about either Samsung Galaxy, Jin Air, or MVP. Which of those three would be the most interesting topic to end on? Pick one.
I think MVP.
MVP, okay. So another team where, in terms of history, yeah, you wouldn't expect this team to be where they are maybe, or to have some of the performances they've had. What do you think of MVP right now?
So, I mean, the thing that I'm interested the most about this team is that they've been shuffling around a lot from the promotion tournament going into LCK finally, but finally they do seem to have gotten some ground that they can actually hold and advance on, because promotion tournament, it seemed like they were supposed to be the best, but then ESC ends up winning. And then MVP like loses a game to Kongdu Monster in the promotion tournament, and it was just like, okay, well, maybe these guys aren't going to be cut out for the LCK. They start things off really rough performances here and there, get absolutely bodied by SK Telecom. You know, perfect game in the first set, and then pretty close in the second one. But now finally 4 and 5, 6th place. They're over top of Longzhu, CJ, ESC, and Afrika Freaks. This is better than I thought this team was ever going to do, and I have to say I'm really impressed by the roster outside of Maha. Maha is the only person on that team that just does not.
ADD is a little shaky too. Like he's
ADD has his moments, but
he's still fighting for the tank meta to exist, right? He's still the guy out there playing the tanks, so he doesn't have the biggest range. I do think that MVP. No, they've got consistently better as the time has gone on.
The big ones are Beyond and Ian.
Yeah.
Like, especially Beyond. Beyond is like...
Okay. Max has been really good, too, so I wouldn't discount Max.
Sure.
But when it comes to MVP, even in the early parts of the season, they were having solid near wins. They had a heartbreaking loss where they couldn't quite kill KT's Nexus. So they were actually competitive. They were just missing a few little things. There were a few minor details that they could have changed to win some of these games against top-tier teams, and they would have actually pulled out a few victories. Now, that has been very steadily improving over time, and now they went on a 6-game winning streak, 3 matches consecutively. They did lose to the Freaks, but MVP has shown that this is a team that actually has teeth, and as you say, Beyond has been amazing. Max has been very good as well. So when you couple that, Ian has been people have not looked at Ian, but his damage is actually among the top 10 in the league. So he's actually been doing a lot of work as a mid laner and been, I think, a little bit underappreciated.
Yeah, I mean, especially when he gets his hands on Varus. I mean, that's a huge component of why his damage per minute is so high. But I mean, he's played Azir, he's played Anivia, Vladimir and whatnot. Didn't win with it, but he is getting into these picks that are now dominating the meta, so he's definitely spreading himself out there, but still has that reliant pick like the Varus where he can sit back and be safe and just like poke out and constantly do damage. But I just think that this team has a lot of potential. Do I think they'll go to playoffs? No. I think that they will probably rest around where they're at right now, but even so, coming in as the rookie team, beating out ESC that beat you in the finals for Challenger, and then like topping teams that have been in the league for so long, CJ, Longzhu, like this is a really good start for these guys, and I'm really impressed by them so far.
I just love the fact.
I think SKT should start searching for how much money they have to pay MVP to get beyond to end this season. That's one of the things I don't understand about Korean teams is that they don't make very many roster changes during the season. You would think that some of these teams like SKT would be like really interested in player buyouts right now and seeing what they could make happen. But that basically never happens in Korea, but it happens a lot in the LCS.
Yeah, I mean, we know. Yeah, we can take a look at the energy swap over to C9 for Impact. That's a big example of that. Like, there's a lot of different things that get shaken up in the middle of it. Santorin coming in, Moon moving to Team Liquid, now subbed for Dardoch, where he was starting. There's been a lot of shakeups over there, and it's pretty stagnant here.
I just love that there's a professional player with the alias Ian. Like, I want to start a team, okay? And the team's going to be called...
Steve?
The team's going to... Yeah, there you go. The team's going to be called Just Regular Guys. It's going to be Steve, it's going to be Ian, and it's going to be Mickey. That's going to be my foundation. They're the lanes. And what we're going to do is... Yeah, Max can be in there. He can be there. So we've got 4 players already. We need a jungler now with a very average name, basically. The problem with this Achilios is I've said this before on the show, but basically I remember on this like a comedy podcast years ago, or maybe like a radio show or something. They used to have this principle where they said that in a weird way you can usually tell if a band is going to hit big by whether their name actually sounds like it could be like a great band's name. Like, you'll never have like "Welcome to the Stage," one toadstool and a pig's bottom. Like, that'll never be the name of a band that'll sell out Wembley, right? So in similar fashion, Achilios, I don't know that there will ever be a highlight video, Ian, the unkillable demon king. It doesn't feel like it rolls off the tongue here. I don't feel like that's not in his future, I'm afraid.
Probably not. And I mean, that's also reflective in his picks. He doesn't play anything that would really garner much of a highlight reel, unless it's just like, oh, look at all these piercing arrows. He does damage. Like, that's pretty much what his highlight reel would be. Okay. But he is good. Like, he's not a flashy player, but he's definitely a strong one. And that's really good for MVP. Beyond, though, is like the big factor that just spells success for the team so far, I feel. Like, he's just been really impactful. He still plays the Graves, which we don't see too many people do. Winged, Jesus, cat. Just whip me in the face with their toy. We don't see too many people playing the Graves outside of like Winged, but he still does it. He makes it work. But even like Gragas, which we've seen actually making a bit of a return. A lot of people have been playing that. Bless last night had a really good game with it, but still plays that. And I think that's a big factor for them. Like they have a large pool of champions that they can pull from in the jungle to try to find success. The Amumu probably shouldn't be touched.
How does Beyond that stack up in the league then? Admittedly, obviously not one of the best teams. It's hard to look like your absolute best, but what's your current feeling?
He's definitely one of the best junglers in the league right now. He's really good.
Yeah, I'd say...
with Peanut's season and Blank and Bengi not doing very well...
Peanut's score...
And score is probably the best, but... Beyond is probably top 3 right now. Maybe Peanut's been looking better, but where else do you go? Ambition's been pretty good.
He's had a really hard time creating pressure lately in some of their games, but overall he's okay. Winged has been like one of the people that's at least had consistent performances on Jin Air despite their recent failures. But I would still say Beyond's probably above Wing. So I'd probably say it's like score, Peanut, Beyond, and then Winged from there, and then I don't know where you go after that. Maybe Ambition.
Well,
Bless has been good too. So
Bless
has been.
Okay, right. Achilios has to go now. So, do you have a final parting message for people on Summoning Insight who have watched this show?
Thanks for watching. Hope you don't think I'm an idiot now.
Okay. Good disclaimer. Every guest should say that at the end, right?
Hope I showed that despite being a play-by-play, I at least have some innate knowledge of the scene that I cast.
Innate knowledge. That's going to be the name of my other show that I start when Monty goes to whatever indiscriminate game he's going to, and I have to get another League of Legends person. It's going to be called Innate Knowledge. Obviously, Froscorum will make the return there because she doesn't actually always speak from the facts. She just goes with what she knows to be true on a deep fundamental level, and then manifests into the universe, like Leona and all that good stuff. Okay, so thanks for coming on the show. That's going to be the end. I'm now going to press the stop recording button.